It's 1:30, so let's go ahead and get started. Welcome to our webinar today on Import 101 training. This is a basic training on imports. I'm Kim Taylor. I'm the Marketing Director for Scarborough, and this is Kevin Ekstrand, our Vice President of Sales and Marketing. Kevin is a licensed customs broker and a certified customs specialist, and he will be giving our training today. For those of you that have been joining us in the past year, thank you. We've enjoyed putting on monthly webinars in relation to global trade for the past 14 months or so. In addition to our global trade webinars this year, we introduced a NAFTA chat series where we focus on North American trade, foreign policy and regulation changes, shipment processes between Canada, USA, and Mexico, among other things. We've got a lot of special guests lined up, so I hope that you stay tuned for those. Another thing to note about our webinars is that they're interactive. So we encourage you to submit your questions via the Q&A button at the top of your screen. If we can't get to all the questions today, someone at Scarborough will be reaching out to you to answer your questions directly in the next few days. You can start submitting your questions now if you'd like, and you can also submit them anonymously if you'd like to. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about Scarborough. The Scarborough Group of Companies acts as a global logistics partner to our clients all over the world. We've been in business since 1984, and we're headquartered in the heart of America, Kansas City, Missouri. We have local offices in Chicago, St. Louis, Des Moines, Dallas, New York, Laredo, Nuevo Laredo, Mexico, and Shanghai, China. We also have close partners that act as an extension of our team in every major port in the world. We are one of the top U.S. customs broker in the Midwest, and we offer international freight forwarding, domestic truck brokerage, local trucking on our own asset-based trucks, warehousing and distribution, NVOCC services, which is our consolidation division, large equipment and oversized cargo moves, NAFTA services, and one of the things we're most known for is our trade compliance consulting and training services. So if you're interested in learning more about us, don't hesitate to call one of us or contact us directly. In the next few months, as I mentioned, we'll have a lot of speakers coming up. Some of the speakers we've got joining us include our own Mexico, USA Borders Operations Manager, American shipper, the U.S. Department of Transportation, our Canadian customs broker partner, the Export-Import Bank of the United States, among some other experts in Scarborough. So anyway, stay tuned for more webinars, and I'm going to turn it over to you, Kevin.
All right, thank you, Kim. It's great to be back with everybody. Imports is my passion. So many of you that know me know I can talk about different aspects of importation all day long. And here we're going to try to do it in 1 hour and get to all of your questions. So I'm going to kind of go through this because we are putting this at a high level, 101. These are some of the basics that folks need to know. Many of you asked some great questions, Some of them were very, very specific, very specific to specific commodities, trade lanes, those kinds of things. We will try to get to those, but as Kim said, if we can't, then we will get in touch with you on a one-to-one basis, as we have in all past webinars for those types of questions, to talk to you specifically, get the details, and get you the advice that you need in order to proceed. So today's webinar is Import 101, and we're going to kind of look at this from an import process standpoint. So what I've got showing here is really an import, a very vanilla import process, starting with the issuance of the purchase order to your vendor overseas, goods being manufactured by the manufacturer, goods then get shipped down to the port, get loaded on board a vessel, a plane, a train, a truck, whatever it might be, depending on the mode of transportation. They leave the factory heading for the United States, and then and along the way, we're going to talk about some of the import compliance related issues and things that you need to be thinking about along this process. So again, this is the process we're going to kind of follow and talk about some things that happen during this. Now, we may lean a little bit looking at the group of people that are attending today. We've got a lot of ocean importers here, so we may lean a little bit that way for today's purpose. But anyways, this applies to all modes, and we will mention all modes of transportation today. So let's start out with the issuance of the purchase order. This is something that you do on a daily basis. Many of you are doing this multiple times a day to your overseas vendor. But what are you thinking about when you issue that purchase order? Not just the number of pieces you want and when you need them to be here for your just-in-time manufacturing or your just-in-time distribution services, but things that you need to be thinking of are one, what Incoterm am I going to use? And we're going to focus a little bit about Incoterms here in a second. But Incoterms is a presentation that we could give all on its own because of the intricacies. I know I give training all over the country to our clients, to the purchasing folks, to the accounting folks, etc., as it relates to Incoterms and what Incoterms are. And we've got to be thinking of what mode of transportation am I going to use to get the goods from origin vendor to the United States here, along with the pricing to accommodate that meets that final destination goal as far as when is it going to get here. So the key in that is, again, communicating that. And as we talk through some of this, be thinking about your purchase order. And does your purchase order provide your vendor with all the information that they need in order to make a successful importation for you in the end? So let's talk quickly about Incoterms. I've got on up here the Incoterms 2010. The Incoterms roughly change about every 10 years or so. At least the first book, or the previous book, was in 2000. This last one in 2010. And Incoterms tell us two things and two things only. They tell us, one, who pays for what, and the second is, where does risk of loss transfer? That's all. Okay, so anybody that tells you that Incoterms might say rumors out there, or things that are falsehoods, that Incoterms tell me who has to be the importer of record. Nope, doesn't tell you who has to be the importer of record. It tells you who has to pay for that, and it tells you where risk of loss transfer happens. Okay, so when I look at Incoterms, and my recommendation on the importation side is always an element that Incoterms don't necessarily tell us, but it's control. It's who controls the merchandise. You as the importer of record, I always recommend that you take full control. And the terms that I use for that are all the F terms. So FCA, FAS, FOB, those are the terms that I recommend utilizing for you, the importer of record, because they give you maximum control. They allow you to pick which freight forwarder you're going to use, and they allow you to control the costs. Because if your vendor is utilizing, if you have to use your vendor's freight forwarder, odds are if pricing changes, your vendor, especially if it goes down, your vendor is then going to make money and or utilize the freight as a revenue stream for that. And that's why we recommend that you go with a freight forwarder you trust, you utilize an F term, and you take control of that at origin. So anyways, these terms, Incoterms, are divided up, as you can clearly see on here, as one, any mode of transportation, or two, sea and inland waterway transportation. And if you look, you see FOB right there for sea and waterway transportations. Those of you on this call that are sitting behind the cubicle, nobody else can see you, but I want you to raise your hand if you've used FOB for a truck shipment or an air shipment or even a domestic shipment. Come on, raise your hand. You've done it, right? By looking at this chart, I would say that you're wrong in doing that. FOB is for sea and inland waterway transportation only, because it's free on board a vessel of some sort. So anyways, look at some of those any transportation modes. So if you wanted to use FOB, maybe you probably should have used FCA instead, free carriage. But they represent virtually the same thing. It's just that these Incoterms often get utilized incorrectly. But that's the first place to start. And if you're interested in presenting Incoterms to your buyers, doing training internally, please let us know. We're happy to coordinate and schedule some of that for you. But anyways, Incoterms is number one. It determines where cost transfers and where risk of loss transfers, meaning that if something bad happens to the shipment, say it's an ocean shipment and the container falls off the ship, who bears that risk? And that's what the Incoterms tell you, and this chart is a great guide. And again, my recommendation here for the nature of moving through this presentation is FOB on the import side. On the export side, I would recommend a C term. So second is mode of transportation. What mode of transportation am I going to select? Okay, if I'm in Canada, Mexico, I'm looking probably at truck or air freight, depending on when I need the goods to get here. If I'm shipping anywhere else around the world, I also may be looking at rail from Canada or Mexico, especially for long haul, bulky products. Rail is a great option for that as well. And if not, I'm looking at ocean freight. So here we're looking at full containers, less than container load for ocean freight. Again, the transit time is going to be a little longer with ocean. If you need to get it here quickly, then you would go with air freight. But again, those are the kinds of things that you need to determine at the time you issue your purchase orders. When do I need to get it here? Because the slower it goes, the less it costs. Okay, the slower it goes, the less it costs for the most part. So look at those options of truck, ocean, air, and rail. Those are the 4 modes of transportation. So next steps. Okay, we've issued our purchase order. What happens after that? 1, goods start to become manufactured, right? Your vendor overseas is manufacturing the goods that they're going to be shipping to you. What happens after that? They determine, again, if you're using an FOB term, they're contacting with our partner overseas or the partner of the freight forwarder overseas to schedule the shipment to be booked on board a vessel, on board a plane, if it's an overseas shipment, and or on truck if it's Canada or Mexico, or potentially, like I said, rail. What happens at that time? Documents are generated. Vendor is going to generate a commercial invoice, packing list, certificate of origin, potentially, bill of lading. These are all required entry documents as well. So at the time that they're producing these documents, we always recommend that they send these documents to us, to Scarborough, to the freight forwarder, to the customs broker as well. When I look at one of the documents, the bill of lading, there's typically 3 types of bills of ladings. There, especially ocean freight, primarily, I'm talking because bill of lading is titled to the goods, meaning that the person that possesses the original bills of lading actually has title to those goods. There's one is the original, meaning just that. You have the original bill. I can tender that original bill to the freight forwarder and steamship companies and thus take possession of my goods. And typically that original bill of lading isn't sent to you, the importer, until you've met your financial responsibilities or obligations. So meaning that you've paid them and or you're on credit terms with them, et cetera, et cetera. Next is a telex release. And a telex release, that's a telex bill of lading. The overseas vendor for you will receive an original bill of lading. They will endorse the bill of lading and surrender it back to the freight forwarder overseas. What that does is then that freight forwarder overseas will notify someone like myself or the corresponding agent here in the United States that the shipment has been released. What that does is it saves a little time. It saves them from having to end expense from sending it on a courier over to us here in the United States so that you can tender that original bill of lading here. The next is a way bill or an express bill of lading. Typically this happens with vendors and consignees that are on terms, credit terms, meaning that no original bill is required. The minute this bill of lading is generated, the person here in the United States can take possession of it. So if you've got a great relationship with your vendors overseas, we recommend trying to get them to issue way bills or express bills of lading so that there is no original that has to be sent from one party to the next.
So can I interrupt you real quick? If we're a new importer and it's possible for us to request a certain type of bill of lading, what type of bill of lading do you recommend that we request? An original or a telex?
If I'm a first-time importer?
First time or a couple shipments a year?
Well, again, for that kind of importer, you're probably not going to be on terms with your credit terms with your factory or your manufacturer overseas. So they're probably going to want to issue an original bill of lading because again, they don't want you to just have possession of the goods without payment. And so probably the original would be the way to go. So in that instance, they can still ship the goods. The goods can be moving, but you can't get possession until you tender that original bill of lading. So that's probably the situation that you're going to be in, especially if you're a first-time importer and or you don't import a lot, so to speak. So anyways, that was a great question. So next, what happens is, again, goods are loaded, they leave the factory. Again, if it's an ocean shipment overseas or even an air shipment, those goods are going to get loaded in a truck and they're going to get taken to the port, either to the airport or to the seaport to be loaded onto a container if it's less than container, and or loading leaving the factory. It could have been loaded inside a full container at that point. It's going to arrive at the origin port overseas. And at that point, a couple things happen. One is the manifest from the freight forwarding company is typically being surrendered to U.S. Customs here, meaning that we're going to transmit what manifest information is. And second is the importer security filing deadline is starting. And that deadline for the importer security filing is 24 hours prior to the loading of the vessel by law.
A good one is, can a supplier change importing terms prior to a new shipment without the wholesaler's permission or knowledge?
You know, there's nothing in customs regulations that's really the contractual obligation between you, the buyer, and your seller overseas. And there's nothing regulated on the customs side of things that can prevent that and or that allows that. So it's really outside of the purview of customs in general. I wouldn't think that you would want them to. Again, my recommendation is you as a buyer take control of the Incoterms, buy on an F term. If it's ocean, buy FOB, but use that F term. Even that E term, X works. X works is a good term to use, especially on the import side. The only thing with X works is that it requires that you pay for any export formalities in the country. Now that's not bad in Europe because they don't have those types of that many conflicting terms, and X works is very common, meaning I'm going to pay for the truck to pick it up at their dock, deliver it to the port, and ship it out. Very common in Europe, but that can be really complex in some countries, and in some Latin American countries it can be very complex in Asia as well, because the cost because they require export declarations and export customs clearance, and means you're subject to paying those fees. And sometimes that inland fee in Asia can be really expensive if that manufacturer or supplier is say way inland or up a river or whatever it might be. So that's why we recommend letting them handle what's on their side at an FOB. Let them take care of paying for and scheduling the shipment and paying for their charges at the origin location, and you take it from there. That's why we recommend the F term, but E is not bad. Just have to be very, very particular with what country we pick from. The reason I don't like C terms as it relates to Incoterms is because we're using their freight forwarder, and you as the importer who's responsible for the security filing might not know the shipment is being sent because you don't have great communication with their freight forwarder, especially if that's out of Asia where they change freight forwarders very, very often in order to maximize their return and for profit on the freight piece. So anyways, that's why I don't recommend C terms, is you lose control, you lose visibility, and then you're at risk of a potential violation for the import security filing not being on time.